Welcome to another episode of the Into the Weeds podcast. As always, I'm your host Grant, and I'm joined this week by guest Wesly Hill. In this podcast, we discuss Wesley's life, along with other oddities that we've noticed throughout both of our experiences. As always, I hope you enjoy.
Like getting spayed or neutered, because their bodies naturally are producing hormones because they have their genitalia still attached, and getting rid of those genitalia lowers testosterone rates in male dogs and all this other stuff. And so they're a lot less active of a dog if they would be before. And there's direct correlation between dogs who have their genitalia still attached and life expectancy than dogs that don't.
But I mean, that's why you want to get your dog neutered, is because they're acting crazy, and so you want to get them snipped to calm down.
You could extend the dog's life by roughly 2 to 4 years.
2 to 4 years?
Something like that. I mean, I kind of put that number out of my butt, but it's a podcast, so it's pretty accurate.
It's got to be.
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Heck yeah, dude.
We're up. Yeah, everything's
Hit me
going.
with your intro.
I think
What's
I got
your
it
intro?
pretty balanced. The intro?
Yeah, what's your intro?
We just kind of start.
Heck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, I edited in just a little jingle at the beginning, but that's all post.
Can you sing me your jingle?
No.
It's worth a shot. Oh man, I haven't been on the mic in a little while.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you had the old podcast.
Yeah, the No Name podcast.
The No Name podcast.
Which I thought about bringing that back, because I'm actually because of the hunting industry, I'm actually talking to a lot more people. So I've actually been networking with really interesting people, but no one's ever heard of them before. So I thought about bringing it back, but then I'm also do I want to?
Yeah.
It's dedicating a lot of time.
You come across so many interesting people in your life, and you have these incredible conversations, and you're like, wow, I'm going to remember that for a long time.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, typically after a while, you're going to forget.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey, let's hold that idea, and I want to have you on my podcast, and then you can have it forever.
That's what Joe Rogan does, man. You're basically Joe Rogan.
That's right. Yeah.
Number 1 podcast.
This is the number 2.
Number 2. What is the name of the podcast?
Into the Weeds.
Into the Weeds.
Mm-hmm.
Into or end of?
Into.
Into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's we're getting
into the. Okay, that's
into
cool.
the weeds.
I like it.
Yeah, people's lives.
But not marijuana weeds.
No, but that is what I wanted to talk about.
Hit me with it, man.
Yeah. So you have had a very unique life
so far.
And one of those unique experiences was growing hemp, which is not weed.
Technically it is, but technically it's not.
According to state laws of Tennessee, it is not.
Yeah, it is hemp.
Yeah.
But by actually federally, it's not just the state of Tennessee. So the hemp bill that was passed in 2018 was a federal bill. It wasn't just the state of Tennessee. And then state of Tennessee rewrote it and then put that in for the state of Tennessee. So 2018 was when we were legally allowed to nationwide grow hemp.
Okay.
And then Tennessee rewrote that bill or something along the lines. But it was pretty cool, man. And then you've kind of seen how it's changed over the course, because I've been out of it for 2 years now. We had the largest indoor grow in the state of Tennessee.
Y'all did?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we had the largest indoor grow for about a year.
I never got the chance to go out there.
Dude, I wish you did. That was
and now I'm just imagining this huge warehouse.
Oh yeah, it was 285,000 square feet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we, like I said, it was very large. It was a big operation, and we had 3 people running it. That was it. We had 3 employees, and then my dad owned it,
Well, and you were an employee, but you were mostly like kind of the media guy, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was kind of running the shots, which was interesting because my dad still has his other business going. And so he wasn't really able to focus full-time on both things. And so my dad was basically just like, I need you to run this, which was awesome. I mean, when you're 19 years old and you get handed literally a really large plate and a lot of weed. Like, of course, you take a hop onto the train for it, but it was interesting. It's like been frustrating to see where it's gone.
The
but
industry,
yeah, and it's also been interesting at the same time, like in a good way. The thing that was so frustrating was in 2018 when the bill was passed, there was a handful of people that were actually growing, simply because people didn't know about it. Farmers didn't know about it. But over the course of 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, the entire market collapsed very quickly, which was interesting because in 2019, when the word finally came out, you ended up having a lot of these very large, like, farming operations, specifically people who grew tobacco in the state of Tennessee, switching over to hemp. But what ended up happening was the amount of basically pot that was being grown diluted the market so much that it was impossible to sell it, because you have one guy over here that's supposed to be selling their product for $1,000 a pound, and then you have this guy over here, because he grew 2,000 acres, he's able to sell it for $20 a pound and still make a really good profit. And so that was the problem we ran into, was with being an indoor grow, we're able to sell it as a medical product, but with the average day consumer not being educated enough, knowing about the product and why it's valuable to have medical grade, it basically ended it. And so it was just, there's too many moving parts and not enough time to be able to sufficiently grow the business. And so it was easier just to call it quits and move on to something different.
When did y'all get out? Did y'all get out in 2020, or did
2020
y'all get out
was
before?
like our official year of ending it.
Okay.
And so we sold the building in 2020. Towards the end of 2020 is when we officially got out of it. And we sold the business in general to one of the other partners that my dad had, and basically it was a buyout is what it was. And then they ended up a year later was able to sell the whole business to a company out of New York, which was good to see.
Yeah.
But it just didn't make sense, and also my, I don't want to say religious views, but religious views in a way didn't line up with what we were actually doing. So that wasn't a help as well.
Yeah.
And so, but it was fun. I really wish you were able to come up and see it.
Well, just all the stories that I heard, like, there was like an office in there.
Yeah.
And y'all grew everything by like UV lights. So I just imagine it's like this huge purple.
Oh, dude! Like, so we had two massive rooms. Well, three. Two of them were called flower rooms. So there's two different stages, which I'm probably butchering this now because I haven't done it in so long. But there's the flowering stage, and then there's a vegetation stage. The vegetation stage comes first. And so you grow these plants to be a certain size, and then there's this process called a flip, and then you flip them into a flower. So the bud that people actually smoke, and where CBD or THC is actually like made in the plant, is in the flower stage. And then you do that for 8 weeks. And so we had these three massive rooms. One of them was really purple, and one of them looked like the sun.
Oh my God.
It was so bright. And dude, we were pulling so much power. I mean, the electric bill, I remember looking at it every month and being like, how are we going to afford this? Like, it was on average around $20,000 just for the electric bill.
A month?
A month. It was insane. I shouldn't have been doing that at 19. And
y'all had the cops come by a few times, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and we leased space to the cops. That was the best part. Did I ever tell you that?
No.
So the McMinnville Police Department leased 10,000 square feet in front of us the entire time we were there. And they used that as like their base of operations. That was their headquarters. And
it still is, or
no? They ended up the city ended up paying to build a whole new building,
okay.
And so they moved out of that building. But they leased space from us for about, I would say it was like 6 years. So, because we owned the building before we got into hemp, so that made it a lot easier to get into it as well.
Because you had the space.
Yeah, we already had all the space. But it was interesting, man. Saw too many black cars with dudes with glasses that I never thought I would like just randomly see pull up and then drive away. There's been so many times, I'm not kidding you, I was getting so paranoid towards the end because we would have these random cars drive by, and I'm talking blacked out cars, and dudes with glasses would pull up, take a picture, and then drive away. It was the freakiest thing, dude. Kind of miss it.
Did you ever find out like why?
No, I still don't know today.
Oh my gosh.
That's the mystery to it, I guess. Just gonna have to live with not knowing. I'd like to, but I mean, they also thought that we were probably growing some hard stuff when we really weren't. But got pulled over a couple times as well. It's where I like slowly started to grow a hatred for cops for a minute. Just the amount of times that we'd get pulled over and they'd be like, "You guys reek of weed," and I'm like, "I'm telling you, it's not technically weed." And just getting, out of the car, them searching the car, all sorts of stuff, man.
Did you ever have like hemp actually on you that they found?
Every time. You kidding me, dude? If I'm gonna sell the product, I gotta try the product. You know? But it was funny, and it was hilarious too, because my dad didn't like smoking or anything. So I'd be like, "Hey, Dad, try this," and he'd be like, "I'm good." I'm like, "But you sell it. Like, you gotta at least try it." He's like, "Nope, I'm not doing it." I was like, "Okay."
It was just purely like a money thing for him.
Yeah, because I mean, from a business standpoint, it made perfect sense at the time to just and when you have the capital to be able to do it and buy everything up front, I mean, just based off of that, the assets in the building were worth however much money we spent just in power alone. So it was we were able to get some of the money back, but it was still pretty crazy. But it was fun, man. At one point we had, because we started working with farmers towards the end of 2019, and we realized that there was a lot of farmers that grew all this product but didn't know how to sell it. And so we had the resource to grab a hold of their product, make a little bit of profit off of that as well, but help them sell it. And it was honestly pretty rough towards the end of 2020. Towards the beginning of 2020, I definitely would say I got in a pretty deep depression, because I started to see how much of effects it actually took on farmers. A lot of farmers were losing big dollars, more dollars than we were, because they were buying this product not knowing whether or not it was going to grow right, and half the time it didn't. And so it's we would go up to a farmer, they'd tell us, "Hey, we spent $1 million on all these seeds and all of this stuff to grow it for this season," and I'd have to look at them and tell them "Hey, this isn't good, this isn't going to sell." And so I've read some articles. There was a farmer in Kentucky that actually ended up killing himself because of it. He spent $4 million on all this stuff, and then he baled it like hay. And with hemp, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to let it dry like tobacco, very breathable. You don't want it to mold or anything like that. And then some dude cut the plastic bale open, and it was all molded, and it smelled like pneumonia. And the dude was just "We're done. This is it." So it was rough. It was fun at first, rough at the end of it. But
where do you think the industry's going from here? Has it gotten more standardized, or?
I would say that it has gotten more standardized, but I would also say that it's still very gray.
Okay.
I mean, as far as educating people, which I don't smoke anymore, but obviously when I was doing that, I was. But any product you see in a gas station, it's definitely wise to try to stay away from, because it's not regulated at all. And that's been the biggest thing, is we found a loophole in the bill this would be easier to explain. We found a loophole in the bill, and basically the only thing that was actually illegal to grow was THC Delta 9. But in marijuana, there's a lot more cannabinoids that are actually like still get you high, like still have psychoactive properties. And so the loophole basically said, hey, I can grow Delta 8, and that is still going to get people high, but it's very gray, if that makes sense. And so if you see anything in a gas station, don't buy it. But if you go to like a smoke shop where people are actually trying to educate and like show, hey, this product wasn't grown in some dude's backyard in a lab, basically a meth lab, like, then it'd be okay. But even then, it's still kind of bad. But
why do you think so many people initially, like the farmer you talked about up in Kentucky, why do you think so many people just jumped in without actually doing any research or getting any knowledge about how it was supposed to work? Because, I mean, it's been, and again, kind of hemp and marijuana are technically like different things. Yeah. But, I mean, marijuana's been legal in Colorado for close to a decade.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think the big reason why is because farmers don't really look at the product they're growing. They look at the end result with cash flow. Because at the end of the day, every person that is a farmer is farming to make money. If they're actually like not farming outside of a hobby, but as a actual living, you have to make money off of it. And so the biggest thing I would say on why people didn't go in and do research was simply because they saw the profit margin difference between doing soybeans or corn versus hemp. I mean, with soybeans and corn, it's like you can make $2, every 10 pounds, but you have to grow this giant quantity. It's like instead of growing 100,000 acres, I can grow 1,000 acres of hemp and make the same exact amount of profit. But the bill was passed, and a lot of farmers didn't realize what they were actually getting into. They didn't realize how different it actually was, because a lot of people were just thinking, oh, I'll grow it like tomatoes or I'll grow it like corn, when in reality it's a whole different ball game of farming. There's a lot more care involved with the plants. They're a lot more tender because it is a weed. I mean, one small thing is going to completely turn the plant over, and we had that happen on our first batch where we were growing, put a nutrient in it that we thought was going to be good for it, and it comes back and it actually killed half the plants. And then we have to start that process over again, but that process takes 8 weeks, and so it's like we're already behind 8 weeks in schedule, and on top of that we've had to pay for everything already. And so that's ultimately what ended up happening with a lot of farmers, is got in the game thinking they knew what they were doing because they were already farmers, but not realizing the education threshold was completely different. So,
were y'all actually able to sell any of what you grew?
Yeah, we sold a lot. We actually got pretty lucky because of the fact that we had the building we had. We got in with some pretty large cannabis companies, which was actually really cool. And a lot of these cannabis companies that were out in Colorado, UCAN was which they actually went out of business, funny enough, but they were at the time the largest manufacturer for like medical grade cannabis, and they saw us as a potential purchase, basically. And so they were thinking with the hemp bill being passed within a 4 to 6 year time, marijuana would be legalized in Tennessee. At that point, it would be dumb of them not to purchase a business that's already up and running in that state. And so we got lucky, is what we did with the building. The building was the main asset that allowed us to sell our product. But even then, we were still short of a lot of the money that we put into it. And so trying to keep the business running, paying 3 full-time employees and so on, and every other expense with a business. It just adds up very quickly, especially when you have setbacks, like your product dying in the middle of a grow, because the whole process takes 16 weeks, but vegetation takes 8, flowering takes 8. And so if it dies between those two, you're set back 8 weeks from where you originally started. But it was fun. It was fun while it lasted.
Did y'all ever have, I don't know if this was before that partnership, but did y'all ever deal with like someone sketchy who tried to come and buy?
Dude, we had 3 people try to purchase us before.
Like buy out the company?
Buy out the company. We had a deal on the table. Honestly, I've been very blessed to have the business experience I do at my age, because it's allowed me to not have to deal with these problems now. We had a guy come in and try to purchase a company from the front end, and he offered us a very large check, and we signed the contracts. We were all going to get paid really nice, like really nice. I mean, being 19 and walking out with that check, I could have bought a house cash, and signed the contract. The day comes for the first amount of money to come out of escrow, and the money didn't clear. And then 2 weeks later, the second check was supposed to go through. It didn't clear either. And so comes to find out that the guy that was trying to purchase it was like completely fraudulent about his name and all this stuff. Since we signed all the paperwork, he thought that he could basically work around the money. And so we were going to take him to court, and we finally like got a lawyer involved, and the lawyer was just like, let's sit down with him and get this figured out so that you don't have to spend more money on this, because you're not going to get any of the money that they already promised you. This is just going to take more. And so we got it worked out. Thankfully, by the grace of God, we got out of that situation, but even then it was still a major setback. And then we had another company come in, try to buy it from us. Then basically same thing, somebody else from Colorado saying that they were bigger than they actually were. And then after that, we had the same exact situation happen from a company out of California. So, and then we're like, let's just do this on our own. And then 8 months later, we were like, let's just call it quits. So, but it was fun, man. It was a cool learning experience, I would say. If you asked me if I'd get back in the industry now, I'd tell you no. And I think it simply comes down to the integrity of the people in the industry. And so, I don't know, it's changed a lot, I would say.
Do you ever see it becoming more professional than it is, or like?
I do.
Okay.
But I think it's going to take a long time. And I think it, honestly, what I think it would take is the state of Tennessee to legalize cannabis as a whole, and not just hemp. Because even now with the loophole being, with the Delta 8 variants, like you're able to sell those and still get high. Even then, Tennessee as a whole is looking at changing the hemp bill to where that's illegal too. So, I don't know. Tennessee, I don't think is going to legalize anytime soon.
Do you ever see Tennessee legalizing?
I could see by more towards 2030 them going in that direction. I just think that it's always going to be at a standstill, where you've got two parties that are for it but not for it, and it's going to be like very fine numbers where one person's going to say no, and that's going to be the final answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's been very interesting.
You're better with the political stuff.
Yeah,
so.
Not only on the state level, but the federal level, to see the cross political divide of marijuana, because typically you would say like, when it comes to abortion, just as an example, like in the vast majority of cases, Republicans are going to be pro-life and Democrats are going to be pro-choice.
Right.
And there are exceptions, but I mean, just as a general rule, if you were going to stereotype, like
that's how it would be. Same thing with marijuana.
Well, no, if you were going to do...
But it's different in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, if you're going to do marijuana...
The Republican Party's pushing it.
Yeah. And, well, there is also some Democrat support, although because of the supermajority, it's kind of hard to gauge where the party is at. But, it's very interesting to see in states like Tennessee it not be this politicized issue.
Yeah, it's interesting, to say the least. I mean, I think in a long-term scenario, marijuana sooner or later will be legalized everywhere. But, I mean, I still think that it takes a lot of education. And I think one of the big things, too, is educating the police is one of the biggest things. I mean, the amount of times where I've gotten pulled over and they look at the product and the only reason I didn't get out of going to jail was because my story lined up. And they could call the police department in McMinnville and prove that it's true. I think that's one of the biggest issues in the state of Tennessee with hemp is you've got a lot of police pulling over farmers and arresting them with hemp thinking that it's marijuana. And so I think with that being the case, which I don't remember where I was going with this, but... Yeah, I can't remember.
That's all.
Whatever.
Yeah. Police needing to be more educated because, like, when they pulled you over and they just assumed that, like...
Yeah, just assumed. I mean, 2 of the times they actually, like, assumed the worst and they were, like, bringing out drug dogs for fentanyl. And they, like, told us that. And I was like, why would I do that? I'm 19 years old. I was like, I'm just trying to smoke a little bit of weed, man, if anything. But, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest concerns with marijuana is that'll always be an issue, is just drug-related arrests that are a lot smaller than the police report actually says, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you brought up... religious reasons was part of the reason why you wanted to get out. What are those religious reasons, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'm Muslim.
That's crazy.
No. I'm born again, man. And I'm proud to say it. And generally, the Bible does not particularly line up with those desires, and that's okay. I think I'm in a really cool position where I can say, like, I enjoy marijuana, and if it lined up with the word, I would do it, but it doesn't, and therefore it's wrong, if that makes sense. And so the Lord asks us to keep a sober mind, and that's what I'm going to do, you know. But proud to say that I'm born again and not going to be going to the down under, so...
With that being the case, do you see the religious aspect coming more and more into the discussion? Because right now it seems entirely focused on a scientific basis, which I think is why, like, a lot of states are making it, legalizing it medically.
Yeah.
But if it became more of that religious issue, sort of like we've seen with, again, going back to abortion, then it kind of opens people's eyes to a different perspective.
Yeah. I think as far as marijuana, like, we do live in the Bible Belt, so I do think that does have a major role in it, which I don't think is a bad thing. I do look at it from a standpoint of is somebody going against the First Amendment, you know? I look at it from that standpoint. Yeah. From a Christian standpoint for myself, I look at it as doesn't line up with the beliefs I personally go for. But as like a political point of view, like I do think it should be legalized as long as it doesn't hinder somebody else, you know. Which we've seen that's been a good thing, like in Colorado, where you still get charged with the DUI if you get pulled over and you're high, and so on and so forth. But you know, it's like, and you can still, just like if you're doing some bootlegging stuff with alcohol, like if you've got too much marijuana in your car and you're driving, you can still get arrested for that, you know, because I mean it is a crime. But does that answer your question?
Yeah. I remember when I was in Colorado, one of the many occasions where I almost got into an accident is I was driving. We just gone hiking. I was with a group from the Bridger program I was at, and we were coming back, and this person in front of me, and you know, I'd left some pretty good space, but just slammed on the brakes and just like whipped over. And it's because there was a green cross, and he pulled over to get some weed. And I hadn't even expected, like, you know, that to occur.
Dude, that's funny.
Yeah.
It was actually, so I was in Michigan 2.5 weeks ago, and because it's legalized there, and I was just curious because I never actually went to a dispensary before, like an actual true dispensary, and so I like went in there, and it honestly felt very professional. It was very cool to walk in, and then they like scan my ID. They write down all this information for their personal sake of like, hey, we don't want to get in trouble if this comes back. Like, we have proof that you put this as your ID. I had to like make an account with them just to walk in.
Wow.
And then they had a whole separate door. And then the proper term for somebody that like sells marijuana to somebody is called a bud tender. And which is just funny.
Instead
to
of
me.
a bartender,
Yeah,
a bud tender.
And a guy walked out through a door and then grabbed me and Michael, and then we walked through a different door, and then we could actually see all the product. And so we like sat there and talked to him for like 2 hours, and it was just very interesting because I ended up talking to him politically, and he was very far right.
Oh my gosh.
Very far right. And we just had questions about it. Michael had a question about having a pistol in the car with the marijuana, and he was like, that's like very okay. He's like, as long as you don't have over, I think he said it was like half a pound or something like that, you're not going to be arrested for anything and all this stuff. And then he just went on about being with the frogs being gay or something. So it was super funny. But he was a big hunter too, so I talked to him about that for a while. But it felt really cool. Like, I think if in the future, if it does get legalized and we do see this become more of the norm in Tennessee, that is what I would hope it would look like, where it was very, very professional, and there was a lot of background stuff going on to keep everyone, both parties, safe. It was cool. But you were also in Colorado, so there's some cuckoo people out there, man.
Yeah, there are.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
I was gonna say, we went and visited Station, my wife's friends, and while we were there, because they live downtown Denver, there was a shooting the night that we got there at the Core Stadium.
Oh my gosh.
And 2 homeless people were killed by a different homeless person. I was just like, what the heck? But made me a little bit thankful that I was in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, when I was in D.C. this time last year, there was a shooting right outside of the Capitol Stadium.
What the heck,
yeah.
dude?
And then it was on the news, and what's crazy is I had been there the day before, just like to watch a baseball game. And
what the heck, man?
To see like places where I was standing, you know, the day before on the national news was
and the funniest thing
experience.
Is the next day we went to the Core Stadium to watch a
game.
Nice. Yeah, it was open, no caution tape anywhere, nothing, man. But it was
Life
interesting.
just rolls on.
Yeah, dude. Just like that.
Yeah, that's wild.
But
Colorado's a crazy place, though. It's like it's one of the states that has regulated water, so you can only use so much water because they're rationing.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the professors of the school I was at the time, he had a house that was like, the deed was one of the first ones, which meant that he got the initial water rights. And so basically, like, when he was buying the house, he was like, how much water can I use? And the guy was like,
you can use whatever you want.
Yeah, like, essentially unlimited.
What the heck,
like, there is a limit. But
Yeah.
for the purposes of, like, regular human consumption, like, you're good.
Daggone, dude. Yeah, we went on a hike while we were there.
That's
and we went up... Oh, dude, I wish Tennessee looked like Colorado sometimes.
Yeah.
Just so I didn't have to move to the Midwest. But we went to a hike, and we went up to a reservoir. And I didn't really realize it, but we, like, got to the top, and we were talking to some other couples. And they were like, yeah, like, this reservoir, like, feeds, like, a quarter of Denver. I was like, what? I was like, and it's just sitting on top of a mountain. They're like, yeah, if this thing goes out, like, we have a big problem. I was like, that's good to know. So...
And then he swam in it.
Yeah, I did. I did. I did swim in it. Jumped right in, man.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool because we went in it was August, and we were looking up, and the hike was short. It was only about like half a mile up to the reservoir. It was super short. Mm-hmm. And I was like looking at the top of the mountain because the reservoir was below the mountain, and I was like, that looks like ice. And they're like, yeah, that's a glacier. I was like, what? They're like, yeah, that freezes over every winter, and that's what feeds us through the summer. I was like, what the heck? I just thought that was so interesting. And they're like, yeah, and if it gets super low, they'll have some guys go up there and, like, chip away the ice and just let it fall into the reservoir. I was like, this is so interesting.
Let it melt off.
Yeah.
Artificially.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was interesting. I gotta text my buddy and see what that was. We need to go to Colorado, man. Go smoke some weed.
I don't think I could do that. But it's been close to 5 years now, this September.
Yeah, since you were there.
Since I was there. Or technically I graduated in May, so it's been 4 years since May.
Sometimes I just forget that you lived in Colorado for just over a year, or...
it was school year, so about 9 months. Although we started in September, so probably 8. But yeah, it was like you'd sit down in class, and then we had this big window, and you'd look out, and you'd see the mountains. And I distinctly remember on many occasions, I would literally just be sitting in the classroom and looking out and be like, I'm not going to be able to do this for a very long time.
Dude, like, as beautiful as it is, Colorado is a very depressing place. Have you, like, the school shooting rate in Colorado versus other states? Have you seen that?
No.
It's pretty significant. Like, there's been a lot more shootings in Colorado than most states, which is weird to think.
Yeah. Yeah,
as well as just, like, shootings in general. There was, and funny enough, in Boulder specifically. Like, Boulder... The city of Boulder has had, like, I want to say it's 6 or 7 shootings within the past 10 years.
Wow.
Like, major shootings, more than 10 people dead. But...
What do you think that is? Is that... Because Colorado, although it's been probably within the last 6 to 10 years, they've gone from a Republican state to a...
Democratic state.
Yeah, very staunch Democratic state now. Do you think that's... Like, do they already have harsh gun laws there, and so it's people coming from outside the state, or?
I think there's a lot of people moving to Colorado. The thing that was interesting wasn't the fact that it wasn't beautiful. It's probably the most beautiful state, I would say, personally. The thing that was interesting was the way people connected with each other. It, like, you can meet somebody here and grow, like, a legitimately deep connection with somebody, but there it's very different, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain. Like, our friends that live there tell us all the time about how hard it is to make friends. And the friends that they have, they talk about how hard it is to make friends. And we were thinking about moving there for a little while. And when we went up there and visited, we were just talking to people at a coffee shop. And they were telling us, like, random people were telling us about how hard it is and how depressing it is because people don't make connections there. And the other interesting thing is, like, I can't talk about, like, Denver as a whole, but, I mean, not Colorado as a whole, but Denver, the amount of people to the amount of churches ratio is, like, extremely significant. Because it's like for every 20,000 people that live in the area, there's one church. And so there's just like there's not a lot of people going to churches, connecting with people, going to these gatherings, connecting with people.
But there are also some pretty big churches in Colorado.
There is.
Like Focus on the Family is out.
There is.
I never got the chance to go, but on my way to work in Colorado Springs, I'd always drive past the Focus on the Family headquarters.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That was one of our kind of our big decisions on why we haven't decided to do it.
To move out there?
To move out there was the fact that, like, connecting with people in specifically Denver is difficult through churches because there isn't a lot. And like the church that our friends go to, there's only about 100 people that attend the church as a whole. But Denver as a city is massive, you know? And so it's like I can get to church pretty quickly here, and it takes me 5 minutes. If I moved to Denver, it was like a 35-minute drive, and it's going to be hard to connect. And he said all the people there are like extremely old, which isn't a bad thing. But
thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Into the Weeds podcast. I hope you enjoyed, and you'll come back for the next one. And as always, thank you for listening.